Welcome to Big Blend Radio's Jefferson Highway Show. This historic highway was formed in 1915 by the Jefferson Highway Association. It runs from Winnipeg, Canada, all the way to New Orleans, Louisiana. Let's go! Welcome, everyone. We air our Jefferson Highway shows with the Jefferson Highway Association and Roger Bell, the president, who's here along with Nancy, my mom and co-host here of Big Blend Radio and Big Blend Magazines. Normally, we air every fourth Thursday, plus we have all kinds of shows that we air as well. We get a lot of content for the Jefferson Highway, which you know stretches from Winnipeg, Canada, all the way down to New Orleans. And today we're going to talk about the actual creation of the Jefferson Highway. And we're going to talk about Mr. Edwin Meredith, who had the idea for it. And as I believe, this dates back 110 years ago in November of 1915. Am I right, Roger?
You are exactly right. The first organizing convention was November 15th to the 16th in New Orleans. 110 years.
So we're older than Route 66, not competing or anything. I'm just saying we're a little older, but didn't that change because of the highway system going to numbers instead of names? That kind of shifted things a little?
The dawn of the named highways of America started around 1911, 1912, when there was a plethora of movements to start organizing what we call named highways, and they would name them for some figure in history or maybe something, some interesting thing. And a lot of them were not what I would call highways across the country. That was a grand thought until the Lincoln Highway made the decision to expand efforts to create a across the nation east-west highway from New York to San Francisco. And it was, that happened by 1912 or so. And so then you start seeing, some different efforts going forward over time as some of these smaller little highways, some of them, the progression was to start doing these large, long distance highways, which was a new thing in America.
Wow, to me, this is pretty epic. It's like the dawning of road tripping, actually getting in there. And you got to think the cars were different back then to now. And just, doing these we didn't have as many gas stations either. We didn't have that much back then. So this idea of it all is pretty epic. Before we get into how it all came together, Nancy, you did some research on Mr. Meredith. You want to give us a little bit of an overview of who he is? And because he's like one of our founding publishers of the country too, in a way, right?
Well, he's a really intense person. I look at all he was juggling and doing all at the same time. He worked for his grandfather in a publishing company, and a few months later, suddenly he owns it. And he's doing that plus a lot of other things. And he just seems like he was popular to some, but not so popular to others, in that he ran for different offices and never won an election. But he was always kind of nominated, but I think he got split himself into so many parts, doing so many things. That was it the magazine business, the farming magazine, or was it politics, which was the most important to him? But he couldn't separate it. He tried so hard to represent farmers, and I think that was a great thing. And so I think, he must have been extremely busy. When I read about him, I think, man, this guy's crazy busy. He really, really was, I think, and he was innovative. He kept bettering the magazines, which, of course, Lisa, and you know how we feel about that. It's like you just keep going and going and going. So I have a lot of respect for this fellow. I think he belonged to Advertising Clubs of the World, Agricultural Publishers Association, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, which I didn't even know there was one huge chamber of commerce for the entire United States.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was like, wow, look at that. So then he was in politics. I just see he must have been so busy. I'm pretty impressed with him.
Well, he was also the U.S. Secretary of Agriculture under Wilson.
Mm-hmm.
And when you talk about the United States Chamber of Commerce, he was actually a member of the board of directors for about 4 years or so. And then, of course, as we talk about publishing, he went from Successful Farming magazine into what we know now as the Better Homes and Gardens. And so when he creates this highway, I mean, it's just like he kept going, kept going. I think it was mostly for farmers and to connect those communities. And that's something that we're excited about with doing the Jefferson Highway Travel Guide. And I've got some announcements about that coming up in a little bit. But it is about connecting these communities and then, getting travelers to these communities. And it's about supporting the heartland of America, I think. And that includes Winnipeg, brothers and sisters over that little border over there. So, that little border, that little Canadian border over there, just hop over. But Roger, I mean, do you think it was mostly to help the farmers and the farming communities?
As far as Meredith, I think Meredith, it's interesting when you look at some of the early successful farming magazines. He obviously wasn't the only writer of things in the magazines, but some of the early ones, were talking about not wanting to have these large highways and not spending farmers' money for this, that, and the other. Then all of a sudden it changed. And I don't know where the vision, I think probably from his vision, most likely it had to do with the Lincoln Highway. And what he saw is this national road across America. And he made a statement that he thought that they needed a north-south highway like the Lincoln Highway across the United States. And obviously, what state was he living in? Where was he? He was in Des Moines, and the Lincoln Highway went through Iowa. So what better way to do this is to create basically this growing national main highway, the Lincoln Highway at that time, and to help his Iowa and the farmers in his area to create a highway going north-south, which he envisioned to go through Des Moines, where his headquarters was. And we talked about how interesting it was. He was definitely an opinionated person, I think. He was. He did have a lot of drive. There was definitely some creativity to him. Well, I think when Better Homes and Garden, as we know it, came out of it, but it was kind of a fledgling newspaper publication magazine until he kind of changed it a little bit later on. But he became one of the best magazines in the country for years. And that legacy with his family, I mean, his family was in publishing in Des Moines. The building where all this happened, where the first headquarters of the Jefferson Highway were really there, where he presided, is still there today. It just recently, in the last 3 or 4 years, finally got away from Meredith Publishing to a different organization, bought them out. But it took a long, long time for that to happen. And they were for many years. But in 1924, he was nominated to be a presidential candidate in the convention. You're right, Nancy. He did lose most of the things he did. Lost his governor. He ran for governor of Iowa, but he was always involved he came up with what we call the populist movement in the United States. He, when his dad, I'm sure his grandfather, was involved in that also. But he was a strong Democratic presence, and if you look at the 1924 elections, Republican landslides really. So it was a different time, but he was an interesting man, and his vision. I don't know exactly what caused it, but he had this vision, and obviously he had a voice. He started putting it in magazines. He started putting the need for this type of a north-south route. Then he went out and he started talking to people, and he started trying to see where where he had influence along the route north-south, and it led him to New Orleans because that was really his vision. His only vision of the route really was when we get to it. I'm sure he had Des Moines in his vision, but his original thoughts was to have the starting point in Winnipeg and the end in New Orleans. So when he contacted New Orleans in early 1915, he contacted New Orleans to say, what's your interest level there? Would you be interested in organizing a convention of folks? And they were already enamored by it, and what we would call basically a chamber in New Orleans. basically just all of a sudden just began to take it on themselves, and they wrote, I think it was 750 letters or something like that to different towns, communities, places along the route between Winnipeg and New Orleans, and not necessarily where we think of it today. I mean, they sent stuff to Omaha, Nebraska. They sent stuff to South Dakota, North Dakota, and a new state at that time called Oklahoma, which really I don't think was ever in the original vision of the Jefferson Highway. And it was just, okay, you come on to November. We want you to send, quote, 5 delegates from each of these. You can send 5 delegates to this deal. So it ended up, I think Oklahoma sent 42 delegates. It was all kinds of things happened during that time. It was probably almost in 90 to 95% of the newspapers in the United States during that time about this new North-South American highway to rival the Lincoln Highway is the grand North-South Highway of America. It was called in New Orleans, and it was going to be a big thing. And New Orleans at this time was a city that was kind of isolated. Obviously, people would come in on boats, but there was a train maybe, but it was not a. It was considered a growing possible metropolis in the United States because it did not. It was kind of isolated where it was, opposed to a lot of the other big places in the country that were growing. And and it's really not the city of New Orleans itself really has not grown a ton since that time period. Enough, I find, but it was a large city, but it didn't have. This was considered as something to really have a major highway coming into New Orleans. And this was a grand thing that people from all over, there's all kind of things in New Orleans paper at this time, all the different delegates coming in, and they expected so many, and they had a lot more than what they expected. This fledgling group from Oklahoma, which they didn't even really anticipate coming, ended up having the largest group, and a lot of Texans came that they weren't expecting. And for some reason, Arkansas only sent 1 delegate. I think that was from the small town called Grovette, Arkansas, up in northwest Arkansas, small town. And they were kind of overwhelmed. I don't think they were ready road wise. I mean, we think of it as the scenic route, but it would have been very difficult to build roads at that time period through there. And they weren't developed, so it kind of made sense. But Oklahoma just totally they made a big play there, led by a man from my hometown of Muskogee, and a fellow banker by the name of David Fink, and he put some money down during the conference to join, and he ended up. There was several Oklahomans that made a big showing there. Another man from Veneta by the name of Bagby, who's a doctor, made a lot of effort there. But anyway, they were successful in getting the route, sort of. I mean, there was so much infighting at that time between 2 routes. The original thought, I think, I've researched it now, and you learn more and more as you go along. But originally, there were 2 routes thought. I think one of them was going to be what was called the Western route and the Eastern route. The Western route would have gone through Omaha. It would have gone the Kansas routing, but it would have probably gone into Joplin and gone into Arkansas, and Oklahoma was kind of not really considered that part of it. And then there was an Eastern route. That was the one that would have gone through Iowa. Well, obviously, Mr. Meredith probably wanted that route. And there was an established highway that had been called the Interstate Trail in Iowa. A man by Mr. Hopkins was highly involved in that. He was there. And they came up to an agreement that the Interstate Trail would merge with the Jefferson Highway. How much Meredith was involved in that, I'm not 100% sure, but it really, because they already had that route sort of established, it just made sense not to do the South Dakota Omaha route, which I'm sure Mr. Meredith probably played a little bit of a part of that. More than likely. And as that happened there, Kansas and Missouri started fighting over the route heavily. And it was said that it was almost like the border wars were renewed in Kansas, going back, and it got really heated between Kansas and Missouri. I think it probably would have been between Arkansas, but Arkansas didn't send anybody there to speak of. And Louisiana kind of got into some ground because supposedly Louisiana kind of sided with the Arkansas effort in some way or another, and Oklahoma got offended by that, and
Gosh, this sounds like a high
it
school
was like something.
drama.
And you look at the newspaper,
It's crazy.
says it was so much drama. Had the former senator Lafayette Young kind of presiding over this, and they said it got so heated it was just really, and what I understand, that places would get up and sing their state song or their community song, do just crazy things to try to draw interest, or things from this. And there wasn't any TV; it was just newspaper reporting. So no radio really at this time. So we it was just it was a spectacle, really, in a lot of ways. And really, I think they kind of said, we can't really figure all this stuff out, but we're going to do something. What we're going to do is we're going to create what we call cardinal points. We don't know how the route's going to go because we could be here for weeks if we were trying to figure that out. Let's just go over where the route's going to go. And during that time, Des Moines was picked as a cardinal point, and Minneapolis. So that really threw out any of the efforts for the South Dakota and the Omaha. If you look in the original minutes, they actually had a Jefferson Highway committee in Nebraska. It's interesting. So,
Wow.
and in South Dakota. So, there were some efforts. They sent people to the conference there, and more than Arkansas. So, but they lost out to that, and then they all of a sudden they designated, when they started going south, they designated Oklahoma's Muskogee, my hometown, as a cardinal point, and also Denison, Texas, as a cardinal point.
Mm,
That was
yeah.
a surprise. It was, you read in the original Jefferson Highway Declaration, that was a surprise. They did not expect that to happen, and yeah, but it did. And Arkansas didn't give up. Even at the next meeting of the Jefferson Highway, which was held in Kansas City, they sent 38 people or something like that.
Dang, they went from 1 to 38.
Yeah, they went from 1 to 38, and they were trying to. They said, they saw that they messed up, and they were trying to change things, and they actually drew a map of where they thought the route would go through, and it was published in the Jefferson Highway Declaration.
Mm.
But it really didn't get off the ground until the 1920s, when there was the scenic route was somewhat established. But it was quite the spectacle in New Orleans, and they established these deals. But that didn't mean much other than the fact that they had to get organized. There was no money for this deal. It was all through associations. It was all, as you said earlier, it was all community to community built, and they didn't really have what we call Mr. Meredith was the first president, but I know he was involved the first year, but we talked about that meeting, the next meeting with the Arkansas folks. Well, it got so heated at that meeting that he threatened to resign almost immediately. And he did stay on for the year, but he was probably happy to get out of it. And then David Fink from Muskogee, Oklahoma, took over as president for his term.
Well, as a publisher too, because if you start having huge wars, I think it's really fascinating, the connection as a publisher to communities and politics, because even right now, look how our newspapers, one's Democratic, one's a Republican newspaper, conservative newspaper. We got all these different political newspaper or news agencies,
Yeah,
right?
I think a good point
And
is, we think about things today where we're always saying, well, why is things so political, and why we went one network's this way. It was definitely that way at this time period. It really
Yeah.
was. You're exactly right. You had Democratic newspapers. You had, and we talk about, well, why do we have these big arguments and things and different. It evidently was about the same then. It just we didn't have the social media to let us know about all the things that we do today, I don't think.
no, and
But I was just going to say he has The University of Iowa has a whole boxes and boxes, like 40, 45 boxes of his papers and his correspondence and his letters. I'm going through who wrote letters to him.
I want to go.
Yeah, I know. Well, it's interesting because he's got letters. He wrote a lot to Franklin Roosevelt, and he got a lot of letters back. And then
And they weren't
Cardinal.
friends.
No, this is what's so interesting. So there was heated exchange between him and Roosevelt and President Harding, Woodrow Wilson, and then what's his name? George Washington Carver. He had letters with him. And, I'm just looking at the his personality was, like you say, hot-tempered, heated.
Well,
And
an example of that, when I was doing the caravan planning in Iowa several years ago, I was going through parts of the route, and I read letters where he wrote about his travel on the route. And he was complaining about this and that in return, and this needed to be done. He was definitely opinionated. He definitely, and, he let it all out in a lot of his letters. You can notice that. It probably already have, Nancy. He didn't hold back much.
He's straight up.
Well, he was totally 100%, in his mind, totally right. He was very honest, and he wasn't afraid to get in your face.
And that's that's not always a bad thing. I mean, if
No.
if he was stood up for himself, and I'm sure that tenacity helped
Mhm.
make him a successful publisher.
Well, I wanted to touch on the map part of it because, so everyone's having all these fights. And I'm so glad we're doing this show and talking about all this because, as you know, and everyone in the episode notes, I'm going to put a link to the Jefferson Highway Google map where we're plotting the route. And we're which is insane. Okay. I don't know why we thought we could do this, but it's so fascinating. And the
Mhm.
more I work on this, the more there are towns that used to be like a lumber town and thriving towns, and now there's only 2 people. And we're putting
Yeah.
those towns on the map because no matter what, we want these towns to be remembered. Some
Yeah.
towns got flooded out and now they have a township. But the route itself is not a single route. It is not. It is a spider web that goes from Winnipeg to New Orleans, honestly. And so we're putting it all in there, but some things will take you into a pond or a swamp. So we're doing this and it's step by step, but I'm going to let everyone see it. We're putting towns as we go so you can follow as we add towns and of course, destinations and people that are supporting the Jefferson Highway Travel Guide. It is still a work in progress with this map. You'll see people in, Avoyelles Parish out in Louisiana, Soto Parish. You'll see those, and then Greenville, in Greenville, Texas. We've done some coverage out there. I mean, there's just all these different communities and places like Vinita, Oklahoma with Highway Cafe and the Western Motel. Kansas, we go to Kansas and we've got like the Miners Hall Museum in Oklahoma. We've got do you know what? This is actually the Dobson Museum. Let me just give a shout out to everyone who's in this because we've got supporters and also members of the Jefferson Highway Association that have shops and lodging, historic lodging are all part of this map. And that way you can start traveling and planning as we keep trying to follow these squiggly lines that I'm following these old guides that are up if you go to jeffersonhighway.org, which is the membership site, and I encourage everyone to become a member, whether you're an individual, a family, a business. Historical lodging they have a whole section for you. But all members that that are a business member, come see Lisa because you get to be listed on, what we're doing for the guide because we want travelers to be able to follow it. So Roger, but everyone, you can see it. You're going to see it in the episode notes. It is just not the easiest thing to do because there's places like Plano, Texas on some of the guides. And
There's a couple of things to kind of go over here that I think is really fascinating. And a lot of people, I don't even think a lot of our Jefferson Highway folks know this, but the original plan, even early on, even before the conference, is there was going to be other routes. And it's interesting when I read this and go back and see this. There was a plan to have an alternate route to go through Dallas, to go through all the way to Galveston, Texas. for example, and then link up with New Orleans. So, it could have been even more complex. And there was the routing originally, I think, was the plan to go through Omaha and all that. That would have been what would they have done? That would have been more of a straight line route, right? When it got tied off that and it over kind of all the way through diagonally through Minnesota, and then it kind of went, kind of goes a little bit diagonally through Iowa, and then obviously the changes that happened down in Texas and what it wasn't really what we would call a diagonal route. So when you talk about the numbered highway system with Route 66 and others, I don't even know if 66 is exactly a great one, but a lot of the north south and east west routes, when the numbering system came in, they wanted them to be kind of almost, like the Lincoln Highway was, pretty much east west across the country, and didn't have a lot of these twist turns and changes from state to state. That is one of the, if you read some of the things and there's a really good article in one of the publications by the Iowa Historical Society in the 20s with Hugh Shepard from Mason City, Iowa, who's one of the directors. Talks about that was one of the main reasons that it didn't get a continuous number system when the Jefferson Highway, when the number system came about in the late 1920s. It was split up. So that is another reason I think its name identity was lost. And it does create a lot of confusion, but it also creates interest to me. You just mentioned the fact these small communities and whatever got through. Just in the last 2 weeks, we've been contacted and been visiting with a very small town in northern Minnesota called Gully, Minnesota. I want to say maybe it has 50 residents or something like that.
It's on the map.
And they are leading an effort to put Jefferson Highway signage in their community, so they're excited about it. And it's just one of those things that's growing, and little by little, sometimes in a small town like that. And then sometimes it's like last year when Denison, Texas, one of the regional Cardinal Point cities, marked their route. We see it in growing different areas, and it's just always interesting to me. But that's kind of the way the original highway was formed.
I think for the traveler, it's like when we went to Greenville and we drove from Greenville to Bonham. And of course, I ended up in fields on foot. We also did a lot of detours. And then at one point, Stacy from Greenville goes, "Girls, I'm not going further. We're going to get shot." I'm like, "Oh, come on, just go down this one more thing." Because we were on like, we went into places you shouldn't, kind of private roads and stuff. But because they're trying to map it, they have to work with the actual Department of Transportation for each state and region, and that's not the easiest thing. But we did get to Bonham. We did actually do that part of the route after being detoured. And we also found there was a historic highway marker it was just outside Wolf City.
Right.
And there's a historical marker. And I'm like, pull over. In Texas, you'll never get out of Texas if you keep pulling over for their markers. And it was for the National Road. I'm like, we must be on the Jefferson Highway. They would want to pair with the National Road. No, not at all. It wasn't. We were just lost. But I was like, we had a National Road. The National Road comes through here. This was such a crazy time frame. And so I'm trying to piece all the history together. And then we did get to Bonham, and Bonham has got, there's one-way streets. So the highway, that's the other thing doing this map is we have one-way streets that affect everything. And so it depends on where you're coming in and going out. And then it's just really, where can you put your signs? It's what we learned in Bonham with Melissa. And at the same time, really how we look at it as travel people, tourism people. Yes, you want to try and do the original route, but it's obviously had some moments in its life here over the 110 years since its inception, but it's about exploring those towns and those regions. So who cares if you take a detour? Yeah, I think that's part of the fun.
Of the route a little bit in some areas. I mean, every area is a little different, but if we travel the Lincoln Highway today, we're going to see some of those same things. Route 66, we think today that everybody that travels Route 66, you travel it, they almost think it's like every mile. If you don't know it, they think every mile is a 2-lane highway. Its original route of the Route 66. It is not. I mean, you get lost. You get into Tulsa, different places, you're going to be on 4-lane roads. roads, even on I-40 in Oklahoma for a while. You just it's not all there, the original, and then you'll see little pockets of where the original route is not what. There's a section I just went over in Missouri recently where everybody tends to miss this really cool place because they turned on the new highway instead of the old highway, and so that's kind of like us, it's not. It's an exploration, that's what I'm saying. When you get on the route, take your time.
Yeah.
It's not like driving down to a weekend down somewhere. You take your time, you explore the route, you explore these little communities, you go to these diners, you stay in the historic lodging where you can. Preparations for this broadcast, I saw two things in the original journal that just really got me.
Mm.
Because as you know, we started our historic lodging association. In one of the early guides, they talked about forming an association or each city was supposed to have an official Jefferson Highway hotel. First time I did remember reading that, so it made me think that's
Wow.
kind of what we're doing. And then
Mm.
and when I also looked at, they were also forming these visitor centers. They wanted to have visitor centers here, there, and I'm thinking, well, that's kind of what we're doing. So sometimes it just kind of 110 years later, we rebuild this route. It's not all that dissimilar to what they were doing, except they were doing construction and building, and we're not doing that. But it's interesting how this is similar to me and how they market it. So
Yeah.
We need a TV series. Like, you remember the TV series? I'm really going to date myself now. Route 66 with Marty Milner and
oh yeah.
Buzz Murdoch. Did you ever see that TV series?
Yeah, and interesting enough, a lot of it was not on Route 66, and Route 66, even though it's part of the show name, it was very seldom ever mentioned at all on the show itself.
But
But
if we needed TV, it would
and we don't
Jefferson.
have that. We don't have that catchy stick song either. But
Oh, we've
over
got
now,
plans on that. We have plans.
we have had
the-
some attempts at that by people on our board, and then that's great. I've heard a few Jefferson Highway songs, and recently at our last conference, I actually found some more information about the original Jefferson Highway song, but it's not going to be the catchy song like "Get Your Kicks on Route 66."
I think this is the beauty of it, is about really looking at this corridor in different ways. Like we talk about music. I mean, this is why how many times we talk about this podcast and it's like, well, we've got this idea, this idea, this idea. It's like getting the ideas for the highway is just like, it's easy. There's so much. And that's why like the Jefferson Highway Travel Guide is not a one book that comes out once a year, because it's impossible. And how boring when we could do all these different cool things. As we're traveling, we're finding, just amazing, like in Greenville, Texas, there's an old theater this lady renovated. She's had some of the coolest people play there, like Billy Bob Thornton. Every time he starts his tour, he goes there and sets up his tour. It's the first place he goes and does a show on any of his tours, because it's such an acoustic, intimate venue. And she's had so many cool people there, and that interview will be out soon for you all to listen to. You just wouldn't believe who's been there. I mean, then you've got someone like Reba, and Atoka with her, amazing restaurant and in a performing place, So when you think about Dr. John in New Orleans, we've got Louis Armstrong, we've got, Prince in Minneapolis. So
Yeah.
we got to look at, from when it was started to now, and then we've got all the indigenous history and culture. I mean, it's just nonstop, because what it is covering this corridor of all these amazing experiences. And I think now more people are road tripping. The stats are growing every single day. Route 66 having its centennial also helps the Jefferson Highway, because it does create that, let's go for it on road trips. Let's do it with our families, with our friends. But also what we're seeing with this whole growth is like, well, international people are doing it. So that's the other thing. But right now, people are wanting that authentic experience, and they want to go to while we all shop the big stores and have things delivered on our porches. There's nothing like actually going into a mom and pop shop and finding something completely unique. And this is a way to support small business of America. I'm very much like Mr. Meredith on this. I understand his, opinionations on some things, because we really need to protect the backbone of our country and also in Canada, Winnipeg. There is a thing of like, hey, one day we're going to wake up and where's the ice cream parlor? Oh my gosh, are we going to have it delivered too? We need to have those places that create memories. It's where nostalgia meets today and reminds us of really a good time, so we can go see what's her name from, oh my gosh, up in Minneapolis. Oh, come on, the TV show with Mary Tyler Moore. Come on. We want some of that little fun cheer in there. So this corridor is incredible. I just want to let people know that as of today, as we develop our Jefferson Highway Travel Guide, which is a digital publication that's going to come out a little bit more often than we think. It is going to have a Substack. Then you can sign up through the link in the episode notes or just type in Jefferson Highway on Substack itself. And Substack is a place where it's pretty much like a blog meets a newsletter, plus has some social media. And it's a way every time a podcast comes out or a new article or someone joins in the travel directory that we've created or the new guide comes out, the new issue, you will get it in your email box. Hey, this is what's going on. We're probably going to wrap it up as like a weekly thing, maybe as we go. For right now, we'll stick to monthly as we grow, but you'll have the map there. And you'll be able to see as we develop that map. And anyone who wants to send in their, information on that or can help with, that map. If your town is on that map and you have a photo or there's some better information we need to know, please feel free to contact us. I think it takes a village, and this village is one big highway. So let's do it. Let's get them, boys. Just saying. So a lot happening, and it's exciting to see as this develops. But we want everyone to see what's going on in the behind the scenes, so you can see as we develop it and start traveling it. So a lot
we have to travel it all in one shot either. Get out on a weekend if you're in the area. Just explore a little bit of it, and if you need some help on that, send us an email, info@jeffersonhighway.org, and we'll try to help you out. Or obviously this guide is coming out. It's going to be a big help for that, but. We can just discover it in bits and pieces. At least if you were driving this route and I was driving this route, we're going to stop at different things. We're going to be enamored by different things because but those things are there. If you're interested in music history, it's there. If you're interested in military history, it's there. If you're interested in arts or whatever you're interested in, it's there. The culture on the route is really, to me, one of the best Americana experiences you'll have if you take the time.
It's a great route to take your kids on. If you want to get your kids interested in history, which is not always that easy to do, if you take them on parts of this route and you do a little homework, research about what to go and see.
I got a great story on that, Nancy, because my son, when he was 16 years old, he was learning to drive, but he didn't even have a driver's license yet. And we told him, I was just really getting into that one time period about Jefferson Highway, and I said, "This is what we're going to do for vacation this year." And he said, "Really? That's not gonna be fun at all to go up that. I want to go to Disney World or wherever it was, it was on his mind."
Yeah.
We, as we went along, we touched these communities. We ate, we stayed in historic lodging every day, and we got back. And my son said, "Dad, that was probably the best vacation we ever had."
Yeah.
And your kids will appreciate it. And he was 16. And younger kids, they'll appreciate it if you just spend some time and take it to obviously a few things they want to see, but those things are there. There's different entertainment things for them to see along the route for sure. Anyway, it is great and it's great to get kids in this environment. How the mom and pops and things we remember growing up, these kids, they have a hard time knowing what a gas station is.
Well, and now we have all kinds of Instagrammable places to visit and to sites for you to use your phone and do that. And there's parks as well. Let's not leave the natural lands out of this too. There's an insane amount of parks. I'll never forget being in Missouri. And all of a sudden we found some pond. I don't know. We were like, is this on the highway or not? I remember. I mean, I think every time we get on the highway, we start messaging Roger. And by the way, Priscilla, our pink sock monkey, our travel mascot, has her buddy Stinky from Bonham. It's Stinky, the
Yes.
travel master for the highway. They are now traveling together. This is big news, y'all. This is a big deal.
Yeah.
So I want
Really
you to know
like
that.
it.
Yes, we'll put a photo up on that as well
Yeah.
for everyone to see. So, yep. So everyone, thank you so much for joining us. Links are in the episode notes. For the Jefferson Highway Association, again, is jeffersonhighway.org. For the Jefferson Highway Travel Guide, which is a work in progress, you can go to jeffersonhighwaytravelguide.com. The link for our Substack so you can be alerted to new content, that is also in the episode notes. We're excited about that so that you can get it in your email box without having to, where it gets lost in the world of social media. But thank you, everyone, and happy holidays. We'll talk soon, Roger.
All right. Happy holidays to you.
You too.
Thank you for joining us here on the Big Blend Radio Jefferson Highway Show. The show airs every fourth Thursday, and we encourage you to go to jeffersonhighway.org to learn more about the Jefferson Highway Association or even become a member. You can also dig into the history of the highway and share travel notes with friends at the Jefferson Highway Association Facebook group. Follow our shows at bigblendradio.com. Happy travels!